Hi, welcome back to the channel. This week we're taking a detour after a string of deep dives into the world of Philip K. Dick. I thought it was time to veer off the well-lit path and step into something stranger and frankly less forgiving. We're looking at the Caltraps of Time by David L. Masson, a name you probably haven't heard before, and a book that doesn't particularly care whether you have. David Irvine Masson was never meant to be a cult figure, and maybe that's why he became one. Born in 1915 in Scotland, Masson wasn't a prolific writer. He wasn't even a writer by profession. He studied English at Merton College in Oxford and spent most of his adult life as a librarian, first and foremost a custodian of language, not a performer of it. In 1938 he joined the University of Leeds Library, where he quietly worked for over 2 decades. It was during this time, between catalogues and card files, that he wrote the stories that would become the Caltraps of Time. His breakout piece, Traveller's Rest, was published in 1965 in New Worlds magazine and caught immediate attention for its mind-bending depiction of a soldier caught in temporal disarray, a kind of psychological anti-war story set across fractured time. Only 6 more stories followed before he withdrew from publishing altogether. These 7 were gathered into the original 1968 edition of the Caltraps of Time. Just 3 more stories came after, and those only appeared decades later in the 2003 reissue. Masson also wrote academic articles, deep, meticulous analyses on phonetic sound patterning in poetry. These were published over 40 years, from 1951 to 1991. His mind was turned to rhythm, to cadence, to linguistic residue, and that sensibility permeates his fiction. It's not plot-driven, it's structure-driven. He died in 2007, quietly, the way he lived, leaving behind a slim but beguiling body of work that defies classification and arguably resists it. A quick word about 3 of the stories in this book. Lost Ground takes us to an emotionally reactive Britain. Yes, you heard that right. The weather is emotional. A man self-medicates with aerosols and pills to cope with shifting climates until he walks into a wall of time searching for his lost wife. The story is less about the search and more about the disintegration of self in the face of unknowable phenomena. In Mouth of Hell, a team of explorers descends into a strange hole in the earth. It starts like Lovecraft, ominous, subterranean, cryptic, but ends with a kind of dark satire. You descend expecting revelation, you get absurdity. Other stories mess with time loops, language evolution, and perceptual recursion. The protagonists are barely distinguishable. Often the story structure itself seems to fold in on its own grammar. I have to be honest, this was not an enjoyable read for me. It reminded me of experimental music that you feel guilty for not liking. I kept thinking of the Tower of Babel language proliferating and then collapsing under its own weight. I felt out of depth. This book made me feel ignorant, and not in the expansive way that good philosophy can, for example, but in the disorienting way of reading something that doesn't want to be understood. That said, I half liked Lost Ground and Mouth of Hell. They offered something almost touchable beneath the linguistic static, but the rest, like reading gibberish in a dream and waking up with nothing but the residue. Let's talk about the title, The Caltraps of Time. and see if we can get something out of that. A caltrap or caltrop is a spiked device designed to maim, used in warfare to cripple movement. Think of it as a trap that doesn't stop you directly, it just ensures that you limp through what follows. And that, I think, is the book's central idea. Time itself is full of caltraps. Language can't capture it. Our minds cannot follow it. We're stumbling through broken temporal landscapes, crippled by causality, skewed by recursion, and bleeding from every point where meaning fails. Masson's stories aren't warning us about time travel. They're showing us that time as we know it is already a trap, a linguistic one, a perceptual one, and an existential one. To appreciate the Caltraps of Time, we should understand the literary current that it flowed in, the new wave of science fiction. Emerging in the 1960s and 70s, primarily in the UK and USA, the new wave was science fiction's nervous breakdown. It turned away from the rocket-fueled optimism of the golden age. No more square-jawed engineers building moon bases. Instead, the new wave authors dove inward. They ask not what is out there, but what is in here, in the mind, in language, in history. Writers like J.G. Ballard, Ursula Le Guin, and Brian Aldiss weren't interested in gadgetry. They were probing identity, perception, entropy, and madness. Their stories often featured anti-heroes, ambiguous endings, and narrative structures that felt more like hallucinations than plots. Stylistically, the new wave borrowed from modernism and postmodernism, non-linear timelines, stream of consciousness, surreal imagery. They were playing with language the way physicists play with particles, and always there was this quiet war being fought between hard science fiction and the softer fields, psychology, sociology, linguistics. Masson fits this movement awkwardly. He shares the new wave's obsession with time, language, and disorientation. But where Ballard gives us psychic decay and Le Guin offers anthropological insight, Masson gives us a kind of conceptual algebra. Stories so abstract they border on hermetic. The new wave was influenced by existentialism, psychoanalysis, linguistic relativity, and 60s counterculture. And the Caltraps of Time echoes all of that. But it's also more academic, more sterile, and less visceral. It reads like something trying to translate the untranslatable and leaving the reader to pick through the broken syntax of a failed communication. So, should you read The Caltraps of Time? Only if you're willing to feel completely lost. Only if you're okay with stories that wound more than they illuminate. This isn't science fiction for the heart or the senses. It's science fiction as language philosophy. And maybe that's the point. If you've read it, I'd like, of course, to know what you took from it, or if you abandoned it halfway through, like I have, let me know in the comments. If this review gave you a reason to rethink time or the usefulness of reading the unreadable, consider subscribing. Next time I will cover a work by PKD once more. I'm going to do Man in the High Castle, and I must say it's almost a relief to turn back to PKD. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye!